Hello, Orbis here. Recently it was announced that the TV channel CITV would be ending due to a huge decrease in young people watching TV and instead watching YouTube or streaming services. Despite having not watched CITV in over a decade, this is sad news for me, as I have a lot of fond memories of watching CITV as a child, and I consider it an important part and a formative part of my childhood, and I'm sure others feel the same. So I decided to make a list of my top 10 favourite shows on CITV, and this list is purely based on what were my favourites when I was a child, and not necessarily ones that I would enjoy the most now. Also, I'm picking shows that were on when I was watching CITV, which would primarily be the late 2000s, which means that there aren't going to be many shows that were aired outside of that time frame. But please let me know what your favourite shows on CITV were. Let's get started with the list. At number 10, I've got Tricky TV, which was a magic trick show which taught you how to do basic magic tricks. Me and many other kids at my school would make the mistake of trying to actually use these magic tricks on the playground. Problem was that many other kids that also watched CITV would instantly know that it was from Tricky TV and you would look like a fool. Anyway, it was a good show because it was fun trying to recreate what was done on the show, even though it was hard to find anyone that you could fool with them. My number 9 pick is Wolves, Witches and Giants, which was a collection of cartoon adaptations of fairy tale stories and was my first introduction to many of these stories. I don't have much to say here, it's a pretty simple concept, but it made for a consistently enjoyable show. My number 8 pick is Fort Boyard Ultimate Challenge, which was a game show that was similar to the Crystal Maze, where teams would compete in challenges to gain keys which help them in the final round, where they have to collect as many coins as they can. The teams that collected the most coins would compete in the final episode of the series. Me and my brother would get pretty invested in this series and would both root for the team that corresponded with our favourite colours. So mine was Red Vipers and his was the Yellow Scorpions. Other kids were into football, we were into Fort Boyard. Also, my favourite presenter was the guy who had the really cool voice. My number 7 pick is Mr. Bean, the animated show. Even as a kid, I loved Mr. Bean. The humour of it was very universal and could be enjoyed by all ages as it had an emphasis on physical humour, which Rowan Atkinson was amazing at. The animated show did a good job of translating that humour for younger audiences who only wanted to watch cartoons. I really enjoyed it, but even as a kid I think I preferred the live action version. The main theme is killer though. My number 6 pick is My Parents Are Aliens. As a kid I hated sitcoms. In general, I was a bit iffy about anything live action, but especially sitcoms. I guess I just didn't like the audience laughter, and oftentimes the humour didn't do it for me. But there was one exception: My Parents Are Aliens. Like with Mr. Bean, I think the idea of somebody misunderstanding social norms and taking them to the extreme appealed to me greatly humour-wise, and My Parents Are Aliens was a big example of that. The main reason I loved the show was the dad character, Brian, whose constant hilarious accidental sarcasm probably had a major influence on my humour growing up. My number 5 pick is Almost Naked Animals, which was a show about a hotel run by a group of animals, with the manager being a dog named Howie who is an idiot that consistently made terrible decisions for the hotel. It is definitely funny looking back on this show now that I work in a hotel. It's a show that I thought was hilarious as a kid, but would probably find pretty annoying now, although when watching a few episodes for this video, there were some moments that made me laugh. My number 4 pick is Pokemon. I don't really think of Pokemon as a CITV show, but it was on CITV and I did watch it on CITV. When I was watching it, I saw it in the Sinnoh and Unova series, but then I went and rewatched the original series, which I now have a lot of nostalgia for. Pokemon was obviously an amazing show, which I mainly enjoyed for the awesome battles, and I also loved the idea of catching Pokemon and building my own team. So I begged my parents to buy me Pokemon Platinum, which became one of my favourite childhood games, as well as Pokemon Black. My number 3 pick is Jungle Run, which is another game show, but it was easily my favourite. In Jungle Run, a team of kids go through various challenges where they have to collect monkey statues that will give them more time in the final round. I know this sounds familiar, and yes, this is another Crystal Maze clone. They did a good job of pushing the idea that this was a genuinely dangerous quest, particularly in the final game, where if you don't make it out in time, you will get trapped in the tomb. I think I just loved everything about the aesthetic of this show, and the highlight of the show was the big monkeys at the end, where you got grand prizes, and I think I just liked seeing what cool stuff was in them each time it was on. Although it felt like it was a bit uncommon that you would see all of the monkeys be one. My number 2 pick is Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids. This was easily one of the creepiest children's shows of all time. Even as a kid, I felt like I was watching something I shouldn't. It's basically an anthology series where misbehaved kids get met with horrible fates. So I think this show exists solely to scare kids into being good, which I don't think it really did to me. I think it just traumatized me. Some episodes that have stuck with me are this one where a kid eats flies and spiders, kills a pregnant spider, who then gives birth to thousands of ghost spiders, which then make the inside of this kid's body their home, which leads to one of the most traumatizing images of my childhood. Another one was an episode where there were twins called Thick and Thin. Thin is a goody woody two shoes and Thick is a meanie pants, and because Thick is a meanie pants, a witch curses him by giving him a mirror, where the reflection comes to life and basically tortures him and then drags him into the mirror. I think the whole idea of your reflection becoming sentient and then being able to hurt you definitely stuck with me. I think you get the general idea of the show. It basically exists to give children nightmares, and I loved it for that. My number 1 choice was pretty easy, to be honest. It's Horrid Henry. Horrid Henry is a show about a misbehaved kid and his shenanigans. You'd think that the show would exist to teach kids to not do what Henry does, but a lot of the time the episodes end in a victory for him. Henry's nemesis is his brother Perfect Peter, who I hate so much that I wish he was real so that I could punch him. Horrid Henry is the only show on this list that I've actually gone back and rewatched as an adult, and if anything I love it more now than as a kid, and that's definitely partly due to nostalgia. I just can't watch any of those classic episodes without smiling and laughing the entire time. I genuinely think that it's a hilarious show, an important part of my childhood that I will always look back on fondly. So there we have it, my top 10 shows on CITV. I basically made this video as a nostalgia trip and I don't expect it to do particularly well. I'm now going to return to doing Beatles album rankings and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.